You can work hard, think positively, and visualize your dreams with unwavering dedication every single day. Yet there exists one specific mental error that operates like a hidden kill switch buried deep within the machinery of your success. This silent saboteur works beneath the surface of your conscious awareness, systematically disconnecting you from the creative power of the universe itself, transforming your most disciplined efforts into scattered dust that the winds of circumstance carry away into nothingness. Wallace D. Wattles, the forgotten architect of prosperity consciousness, identified this fatal flaw over a century ago and gave it a precise name: the violation of the fundamental principle. We know this destroyer by a more common name: fear. But here is what separates Wattles from every motivational speaker and self-help guru who came after him. He did not teach us to manage fear, to cope with it, or to feel it and push through regardless. No. Wallace Wattles taught us to scientifically annihilate fear at its very root, to make it intellectually impossible, to erase it from the operating system of our minds with the same certainty that light erases darkness from a room. There is a particular kind of pain that you know intimately, even if you have never spoken its name aloud. It is the anxiety that lingers in the background of your brightest ambitions, the whispered question that poisons your peace in the quiet hours of the night. What if it doesn't work? This is not the sharp pain of failure already experienced. It is something far more insidious. It is the slow, corrosive pain of anticipated failure, the suffering you inflict upon yourself for disasters that have not yet occurred and may never occur at all. You have felt this weight pressing against your chest when you consider your financial future, when you contemplate taking a risk that could change everything, when you dare to want something magnificent for your life. And this pain does not merely make you uncomfortable. It actively sabotages your results, creating the very outcomes you fear most through the terrible alchemy of anxious expectation. The world has offered you countless remedies for this affliction, and perhaps you have tried them all. Feel the fear and do it anyway, they tell you, as if courage were simply a matter of gritting your teeth and pushing forward through the resistance. But Wallace Wattles, writing in the early 20th century, understood something that modern psychology is only beginning to grasp. Acting while in a state of fear is fundamentally useless, because fear itself places you on what he called the competitive plane of existence. On this plane, you are alone, isolated, fighting against a universe of scarcity where there is never enough and someone must lose for you to win. Every action taken from this plane carries the vibrational signature of lack, and the universe, being a perfect mirror, reflects that lack back to you, multiplied. To access what Wattles called the creative plane, where you are backed by the infinite intelligence and unlimited resources of existence itself, fear cannot simply be tolerated or managed. It must be completely and utterly erased from your mental equation. What I'm about to share with you is not another technique for coping with anxiety or pushing through resistance. It is the precise logic, extracted from Wattles's profound teachings, that makes fear intellectually impossible for anyone who truly understands it. When you grasp this logic, not merely with your surface mind, but with the deep knowing of your entire being, you will be able to operate with what can only be described as the terrifying confidence of a creator who knows, with mathematical certainty, that failure is not a possibility. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. This is not delusion. It is the clearest perception of reality available to the human mind. And this knowledge has been waiting for you, hidden in plain sight within pages written over a century ago, ready to transform you from a fearful competitor into a fearless creator. Consider this video an antidote, not a temporary relief, but a permanent cure for the mental poison that has been diminishing your results and stealing your peace. What you are about to receive is not entertainment or motivation. It is initiation into a way of thinking that the masses have never accessed, because they have never been shown the door. I am making a pact with you in this moment, a sacred agreement between teacher and student, between the wisdom of the masters and your hungry, awakening mind. In this video, you will learn precisely why fear becomes scientifically impossible when you position yourself on the creative plane of existence. You will discover the exact mental switch that can turn off the fear signal instantly, not through suppression or denial, but through the superior logic of truth, overwhelming the inferior logic of illusion. But I must warn you of something that Wattles himself identified as the primary source of this mental error, the hidden feeder that keeps the fear alive in millions of minds even when they consciously desire peace. There is a very common habit, so common that you likely engage in it daily without a second thought, that acts as a direct pipeline for fear into your consciousness. It involves watching the news, engaging in discussions about politics and economic disasters, and exposing yourself to the predictions of pessimists who have mistaken their anxiety for wisdom. Wattles did not suggest we moderate this exposure. He commanded that we cut it off completely, as a surgeon removes a tumor. I will reveal the full depth of this instruction and why it is absolutely non-negotiable in Part 4 of this teaching. What you learn there may challenge everything you believe about being an informed citizen, but it will also explain why your peace has been so elusive despite your best efforts. Before we proceed deeper into this transformative knowledge, I ask something of you, not for my benefit, but for yours. In the comments below this video, write 3 words: I am fearless. This is not mere engagement. It is an act of declaration, a stake planted in the ground of your own consciousness that signals your intention to the universe. When you write these words, you begin the process of reprogramming your mind, of claiming an identity that fear cannot touch. The masters understood the power of declaration, the way that spoken and written words carve channels in the substance of mind through which new realities can flow. So make your declaration now. Join the community of those who have chosen to awaken, and let us continue this journey together into the heart of Wallace Wattles's most liberating teaching. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already, for what follows will dismantle the prison you did not know you were living in. To understand why fear is not merely unpleasant, but fundamentally incompatible with success, you must first grasp the premise upon which Wallace Wattles built his entire philosophy. This premise is not a belief to be accepted on faith. It is a logical framework to be understood and tested against your own experience of reality. Wattles taught that the universe itself is composed of what he called thinking substance, an intelligent, responsive, living energy that permeates all of existence and constitutes the very fabric from which all things are made. This is not mystical speculation. It is a recognition that consciousness, intelligence, and creative power are not accidents that emerged from dead matter, but are fundamental properties of existence itself. Everything you see around you, from the device on which you watch this video to the body through which you experience life, emerged from this thinking substance and remains connected to it at every moment. This thinking substance, according to Wattles, possesses a single dominant characteristic that changes everything once you truly understand it. It is always moving in the direction of more life, more expression, more expansion, more abundance. The universe is not static, not winding down, not moving toward entropy and death despite what certain interpretations of physics might suggest. At its deepest level, reality is creative, expansive, and oriented toward the flourishing of all things that align with its fundamental nature. Consider the evidence that surrounds you. Life itself is an explosion of creativity, constantly evolving new forms, filling every possible niche, finding ways to exist and thrive in the most unlikely circumstances. From the depths of the ocean to the edges of the atmosphere, from frozen tundras to scorching deserts, life expands, adapts, and flourishes with an intelligence that defies any explanation rooted in random accident. What does this mean for you personally? It means that the universe is not neutral toward your success. It is actively favorable toward it. The thinking substance wants to express itself in greater fullness, and one of the ways it achieves this expression is through you. Your desires for expansion, for abundance, for creative achievement are not selfish impulses to be suppressed. They are the universe itself seeking to express more life through the unique vessel of your individual existence. When you want more wealth, more health, more love, more creative power, you are not being greedy. You are being a faithful channel for the fundamental impulse of existence itself. Wattles was explicit about this. The desire for increase is inherent in all of nature, and your participation in this desire aligns you with the very heartbeat of the cosmos. Here then is the foundation upon which your fearlessness must be built. The universe is inherently friendly to you because its success and your success are not separate things. The thinking substance does not benefit from your failure, your poverty, your limitation, or your fear. Quite the opposite. Every limitation you experience is a limitation on the universe's own self-expression through you. When you fail to thrive, existence itself is diminished in that particular corner of its infinite being. This is why Wattles could speak with such certainty about the availability of wealth, health, and success to anyone who understood and applied the correct principles. He was not offering wishful thinking. He was describing the logical consequences of a universe structured around expansion and abundance. Fear, in this context, reveals itself as something very specific. It is the belief that the universe is hostile, chaotic, limited, or indifferent to your well-being. When you experience fear, whether about money, relationships, health, or the future, you are operating from an implicit assumption that runs directly contrary to the nature of reality, as Wattles described it. You are assuming that the thinking substance might fail you, might run out of resources, might capriciously decide to withhold what you need, or might simply not care whether you succeed or perish. Every fear you have ever experienced is rooted in this fundamental lie about the nature of existence. The anxious knot in your stomach, the racing thoughts at 3 in the morning, the hesitation before taking bold action, all of it traces back to a false premise about what kind of universe you actually inhabit. Consider the profound implications of this understanding. When you believe the lie of scarcity, hostility, and limitation, which is the essence of fear, you disconnect yourself from the truth of abundance, friendliness, and infinite possibility. It is not that the universe punishes you for your fear. It is that fear itself is a state of disconnection from the very source of your power. Imagine a lamp unplugging itself from the electrical outlet because it fears the electricity might not be there. The fear itself creates the darkness it was afraid of. This is precisely what happens in your life when you operate from fear. You unplug yourself from the thinking substance that wants to flow through you, and then you point to the resulting darkness as evidence that your fear was justified. The mechanism is almost mechanical in its precision. You cannot connect to a friendly universe with a hostile mind. You cannot receive abundance while vibrating at the frequency of lack. You cannot draw creative power from the infinite, while your thoughts are consumed with images of limitation and failure. The universe responds to you not according to what you consciously desire, but according to the fundamental assumptions from which you operate. If your deep implicit assumption is that existence is dangerous and resources are scarce, then your entire relationship with reality will be colored by that assumption. Every opportunity will seem risky, every investment will feel dangerous, every expansion will trigger contraction, and every blessing will be received with the anxiety of anticipated loss. Wattles understood that this was not a moral failing, but a logical error, and this distinction is crucial. You're not a bad person for experiencing fear. You are simply a person operating from incorrect information about the nature of your environment. If you genuinely believed you were standing on the edge of a cliff, fear would be the appropriate response. Your biology would be working correctly. The problem is that you have been convinced you are standing on a cliff when you are actually standing on solid ground in a mansion of infinite rooms. Your fear is not protecting you from real danger. It is preventing you from exploring the home that was built for your flourishing. Once you see this clearly, the solution becomes obvious. You do not need to manage your fear or push through it with willpower. You need to correct the perceptual error that makes fear seem reasonable. This is why Wattles' approach is so revolutionary compared to conventional advice about handling fear. Most teachers treat fear as an inevitable part of the human experience, something to be managed, channeled, or overcome through sheer force of will. But Wattles recognized that fear is only inevitable if you continue to operate from false premises about reality. Change the premises, and fear has nothing to stand on. Realize that you live in a universe of infinite abundance that wants you to succeed, and fear becomes as illogical as worrying whether the sun will rise tomorrow. It is not that you suppress the fear through denial. It is that fear simply cannot take root in a mind that has truly grasped the friendly, abundant, infinitely creative nature of the thinking substance. The transformation Wattles offers is therefore not merely emotional but intellectual. He invites you to think your way out of fear by understanding truths that make fear unnecessary. This is why the teaching must be understood deeply, not merely heard superficially. A person who has only intellectually noted that the universe is friendly will still experience fear, because their deeper operating assumptions remain unchanged. But a person who has truly grasped this principle, who has meditated upon it, tested it, and integrated it into their fundamental worldview, will find that fear loses its grip naturally, not through struggle, but through the simple superiority of truth over illusion. Consider how different your life would be if you fully inhabited this understanding. Every morning you would wake not with anxiety about the day ahead, but with eager anticipation for what the thinking substance would create through you. Every financial decision would be made from confidence rather than desperation. Every creative project would be approached with the certainty that the universe backs your expansion. Every relationship would be entered without the fear of loss that poisons so many connections. Every challenge would be met not as a threat to your survival, but as an opportunity for the universe to demonstrate its infinite resourcefulness through you. This is not fantasy. This is the logical consequence of aligning your mind with the actual structure of reality. The question before you now is not whether you want this freedom. Of course you do. The question is whether you are willing to release your grip on the false beliefs that have made fear seem necessary. For many people, fear has become so familiar that it feels like protection. The anxiety that keeps you up at night seems like vigilance. The worry about the future seems like prudent planning. But Wattles invites you to see these experiences for what they actually are: evidence of disconnection from the source of all security, symptoms of the lie you have been living, barriers between you and the life that the universe has been waiting to pour through you. To release these patterns requires courage, not the courage to feel fear and act anyway, but the courage to believe something more wonderful than you have ever dared to believe about the nature of existence and your place within it. This foundation, the recognition that you live in a friendly, abundant, infinitely creative universe, must be established firmly in your mind before any technique or method will produce lasting results. Without this foundation, every strategy becomes another way of managing fear rather than eliminating it. With this foundation, you will find that fear has nowhere to live in your consciousness because every room has been filled with the light of understanding. Wattles did not teach positive thinking as a way of covering over negative realities. He taught accurate thinking as a way of perceiving reality as it actually is. And reality, as it actually is, gives you no rational basis for fear whatsoever. To make this principle unshakable in your mind, let us employ an analogy that Wattles himself would have appreciated, one that takes an abstract truth and grounds it in immediate, visceral understanding. Imagine a child living in the home of a wealthy, loving father. This child does not worry about their next meal. They do not lie awake at night anxious about whether there will be breakfast in the morning. They do not hoard their toys out of fear that no more will come. They do not hesitate to ask for what they need because they have never experienced the terror of being denied. This child lives in a state of absolute security, not because they have personal power to provide for themselves, but because they know the nature of the house they live in and the character of the father who owns it. Now, observe the basis of this child's security. It is not ignorance. The child may be quite aware that poverty exists in the world, that other children go hungry, that resources can be scarce in certain circumstances. But this knowledge does not touch them with fear because they know it does not apply to their situation. They live in a different reality, one defined by the wealth and generosity of their father. The news reports about economic hardship are real, but they are not relevant to a child whose father has unlimited resources and unlimited willingness to provide. This is not denial. It is accurate assessment of one's actual circumstances. The child's peace comes not from shutting their eyes to the existence of poverty, but from opening their eyes to the existence of their father's provision. Wattles teaches that you are this child, whether you know it or not. You are living in a wealthy, intelligent universe that wants you to succeed with a desire even greater than your own wanting. The thinking substance that constitutes all of reality is your father in the truest sense. It is the source from which you came, the ground in which you exist, and the provider of everything you could ever need. And this father is not poor, not stingy, not capricious, not conditional in its love. This father has infinite resources, infinite creativity, and infinite willingness to see you flourish. You are not an orphan struggling to survive in a harsh world. You are an heir living in a mansion, surrounded by abundance you have not yet recognized because no one ever told you to look. Fear, in this analogy, is acting like an orphan in that mansion. It is the behavior of someone who does not know where they live or who their father is. When you worry about money, you are acting as if you were alone in the universe, dependent solely on your own limited efforts and the unreliable whims of an indifferent economy. When you fear the future, you are acting as if no intelligence were guiding the unfolding of events, as if you were a leaf blown about by random winds, with no one caring where you land. When you hesitate to pursue your dreams out of fear of failure, you are acting as if the universe had no investment in your success, as if you could fall and no one would catch you. All of this is the behavior of an orphan, and it is all based on a terrible mistake about your actual situation. The error is not moral but perceptual. You have not sinned by being afraid. You have simply misperceived your circumstances. And this misperception is entirely understandable, given the world you grew up in. From your earliest days, you were surrounded by people who themselves believed they were orphans in a hostile universe. Your parents may have worried constantly about money, communicating through their anxiety that provision was uncertain. Your schools may have taught you that success comes only through fierce competition because there is not enough to go around. Your media certainly bombarded you with evidence of scarcity, danger, and disaster, creating the impression that the world is a threatening place where safety is the exception rather than the rule. Is it any wonder that you absorbed the orphan mentality when orphan thinking surrounded you from birth? But here is what changes everything. The orphan mentality was never the truth about your situation. It was always a lie, passed down from generation to generation by people who had never been told about their inheritance. The mansion was always there. The father was always providing. The resources were always infinite. You have been living in abundance while believing in scarcity, surrounded by love while feeling alone, held by the universe while convinced you were falling. And the moment you wake up to the truth of your situation, really wake up, not just intellectually note it but viscerally realize it, fear dissolves because it has no logical basis in your actual circumstances. Think about what happens to fear when you truly grasp that your supply does not depend on the economy, your employer, your investments, or any external circumstance, but flows directly from an infinite source that cannot be exhausted. The economic news that sends millions into panic becomes irrelevant to you, not because you are in denial, but because you understand that your provision comes from a different level of reality altogether. Your employer could fire you tomorrow, and while you might need to adjust your activities, you would not need to fear because you know that the thinking substance has infinite ways of providing for those who remain connected to it. The stock market could crash, and you would watch with the detachment of someone who knows their real wealth cannot be touched by market fluctuations. This is not positive thinking covering over negative realities. This is accurate perception of the deeper reality that underlies all surface appearances. The child in the wealthy home is not practicing positive thinking when they feel secure about breakfast. They are simply perceiving their actual situation correctly. And you are not engaging in self-deception when you release fear based on your understanding of the thinking substance. You are simply finally seeing clearly what has always been true. The orphan mentality was the delusion. The heir consciousness is the accurate perception. Fear was based on lies. Fearlessness is based on truth. Wattles invites you to conduct an experiment in your own life. For the next day, try living as if you actually believed you were a child in a wealthy, loving father's home. When a worry arises about money, gently remind yourself, this is orphan thinking. I live in a mansion. When anxiety about the future grips your chest, breathe deeply and remember, my father is infinitely intelligent and wants my success even more than I do. When fear tells you to play small, to avoid risk, to protect what little you have, recognize this as the voice of someone who does not know where they live. You are not being asked to pretend or deny reality. You are being asked to perceive reality more accurately than you ever have before. The logical structure of this truth is what makes it unshakable once you grasp it. If the universe is indeed a thinking substance oriented toward more life, then your success is built into the very structure of reality. If this thinking substance is infinite, then there can be no legitimate scarcity to fear. If it wants to express itself through you, then your expansion is its expansion, and it will support you with all its infinite resources. The only way fear makes sense is if one or more of these premises is false, if the universe is actually hostile, limited, or indifferent. But Wattles demonstrates through rigorous reasoning that these premises are true, that the evidence of nature and the logic of existence both point to a friendly, abundant, infinitely creative reality. Once you accept the premises, fearlessness follows as inevitably as the conclusion follows the premises in a valid, logical argument. This is why understanding is so much more powerful than willpower in eliminating fear. Willpower tries to suppress fear while leaving its logical basis intact, an exhausting and ultimately failing strategy. Understanding removes the logical basis of fear, and without that basis, fear cannot sustain itself no matter how much it has dominated your past. A child who discovers they have been adopted into a billionaire's family does not need willpower to stop worrying about their next meal. The understanding itself transforms their emotional reality. Similarly, you do not need to force yourself into fearlessness. You need to understand your way into it, and the understanding will do the work that willpower never could. What remains once fear is dissolved through understanding is not recklessness or naivety, but something far more powerful, rational trust. This is trust based not on blind faith or wishful thinking, but on the clear-eyed recognition that a universe designed by intelligence would not be designed for your failure. The entire structure of existence supports your flourishing. Failure is the anomaly, the result of disconnection from source, not the natural outcome of engagement with reality. With this rational trust as your foundation, you can take bold action without the paralysis of fear, make significant investments without the anxiety of potential loss, and pursue your greatest dreams with the calm certainty that the universe itself is backing your play. The shift from fear to rational trust is not a one-time event, but an ongoing reorientation of your fundamental assumptions about reality. Every time fear arises, it is an invitation to deepen your understanding, to more fully grasp the truth about the house you live in and the Father who provides for you. Every anxiety is a signal that orphan thinking has temporarily reasserted itself, and the cure is not suppression but remembrance, remembering who you are, where you live, and what kind of universe you actually inhabit. With each remembrance, the grooves of fear grow shallower in your mind, while the grooves of trust grow deeper, until eventually, fearlessness becomes your default state, and fear becomes a distant memory of a confused past. The understanding we have established, that fear is a logical error based on false premises about a friendly, abundant universe, must now be translated into a specific mental state that you can consciously cultivate and maintain. Wattles did not merely offer philosophy, he offered practical methodology, a way of being that anyone could adopt through deliberate practice. The mental state required for living without fear is what we might call rational trust, and it is essential that you understand both words in this phrase, for they protect you from two opposite errors that have derailed countless seekers before you. Trust, by itself, might seem to invite passivity or wishful thinking. The word conjures images of naive believers who ignore practical realities in favor of pleasant fantasies. This is not what Wattles teaches. The trust he advocates is not the blind faith of someone who refuses to engage with reality, but the earned confidence of someone who has deeply investigated reality and found it worthy of trust. It is the trust of a scientist who has tested a hypothesis repeatedly and now relies on the confirmed principle. It is the trust of an engineer who understands the laws of physics and builds bridges confident that those laws will hold. You are not being asked to trust because trusting feels good. You are being asked to trust because understanding the nature of existence makes trust the only rational response. This is why the word rational is equally important. Rational trust is trust that has passed through the fire of reason and emerged stronger, not weaker. It has been examined, questioned, tested against logic and experience and found valid. When fear whispers its lies about scarcity and danger, rational trust can respond with coherent argument, not just emotional determination. I trust because I understand that the thinking substance is infinite and cannot run out. I trust because I recognize that a universe oriented toward more life would not design my failure into its structure. I trust because the very desire for expansion within me is evidence of the universe's desire to expand through me. This is trust with teeth, trust that can hold its ground against the sophisticated arguments of fear. Consider how different this is from the positive thinking often promoted in self-help circles. Positive thinking frequently amounts to affirmations spoken over unexamined negative beliefs, a layer of icing over a cake made of doubt. It requires constant effort because the underlying structure remains unchanged, and the positive thoughts must continuously fight against the negative foundation that still constitutes the real operating system of the mind. Rational trust, by contrast, changes the underlying structure itself. It is not a technique applied on top of fear, but a replacement of the fearful foundation with a foundation of understanding. Once installed, it requires less and less maintenance because truth is inherently more stable than illusion. The cultivation of rational trust begins with a decision, not a decision to feel good, but a decision to align your thinking with what you have understood to be true about reality. You have now heard the argument, the universe is a thinking substance, infinite and oriented toward life, inherently supportive of your expansion. You must decide whether you accept this argument, not whether you like it, not whether it makes you feel good, but whether you find it logically sound. If you do, then you have a responsibility to think in accordance with it. To continue thinking fearful thoughts after accepting the truth of abundance is a kind of intellectual dishonesty, a refusal to follow your own conclusions where they lead. This decision must be renewed, especially in the beginning, because old habits of thought do not surrender easily. For years, perhaps decades, you have been rehearsing fearful thinking, strengthening neural pathways of anxiety and worry. These pathways will not disappear overnight simply because you have understood a new truth. They will continue to fire, presenting you with fearful scenarios and anxious feelings as if the truth had never been revealed. This is not evidence that the truth is false. It is evidence that the brain is a pattern recognition machine that takes time to rewire. Your job, in the period of transition, is to consistently interrupt the old patterns with the new understanding, to refuse to indulge fearful thinking even when fearful feelings arise. Wattles would say that this is a matter of using your will correctly. The will is not meant to force yourself into actions against your nature. It is meant to direct your thoughts toward truth and hold them there until the truth becomes natural. When a fearful thought arises, you do not wrestle with it or try to suppress it through force. Instead, you simply redirect attention to the truth you have understood. I notice that fear has arisen. This is based on the false premise that I am alone in a hostile universe. The truth is that I am supported by an infinite thinking substance that wants my success. I choose to align my thinking with this truth. Repeated consistently, this redirection gradually rewires the brain until fearlessness becomes the default and fear becomes the interruption. The practical implication is that rational trust must be cultivated deliberately, especially during times that would normally trigger fear. When you check your bank account and see a lower number than you hoped, that is precisely the moment to practice rational trust. My supply does not come from this account, but from the infinite formless substance. This number is a temporary condition, not my permanent reality. When you face uncertainty about your career, that is the moment to remember the truth. The universe has infinite ways of providing for me, far beyond my ability to imagine. My job is to remain connected to Source and take whatever action feels inspired. When someone you love is struggling, that is the moment to hold the truth for both of you. This person is also a child of the universe, surrounded by infinite support. I trust that what is needed will be provided. Notice that rational trust does not mean passivity or inaction. The child in the wealthy home still needs to come to the breakfast table. The food does not materialize in their stomach while they sleep. But they come to the table without anxiety, without the fear that there might not be enough, without the desperate grasping that characterizes orphan consciousness. Similarly, you still take action in your life. You work, you plan, you invest, you create, but you do these things from a foundation of trust rather than from a foundation of fear. The actions look the same from the outside, but their inner quality is completely different, and this inequality determines the kind of results they attract. The person who acts from fear brings the frequency of scarcity into everything they do. Their work is tinged with desperation. Their planning is contaminated by worst-case scenarios. Their investments are made from a place of trying to protect against disaster rather than participate in expansion. The universe, being responsive to the fundamental assumptions from which we operate, reflects this scarcity back, often creating the very outcomes that were feared. But the person who acts from rational trust brings the frequency of abundance into their efforts. Their work carries the energy of confident creation. Their planning focuses on possibilities rather than threats. Their investments express participation in an expanding universe. And the universe responds to this frequency with opportunities, resources, and outcomes that match the expectation of abundance. This is what Wattles meant when he taught that success is the mathematical norm and failure is the anomaly caused by fear. In a universe designed for expansion, expansion is the default outcome for anyone aligned with that design. Failure requires a specific cause, the disconnection from source that fear creates. Remove the fear, maintain the connection, and success becomes as natural as a river flowing downhill. This does not mean success without effort. The river still must flow, but it means success without the exhausting struggle against imaginary obstacles that fear creates. It means success as the natural expression of your aligned being, rather than success as a prize wrested from a reluctant universe through desperate striving. The mental state of rational trust, therefore, is not merely a pleasant addition to your life, it is the necessary condition for receiving what the universe is constantly trying to give you. Without trust, you are like a clenched fist trying to receive water. The water is freely offered, abundantly available, but your very grasping prevents you from receiving it. Rational trust is the opening of the fist, the relaxation into receptivity that allows the flow to occur. And it is rational because it is based on understanding, not on forcing yourself to relax while still believing that you are surrounded by threat. You cannot truly open to abundance while believing in scarcity. The understanding must come first, and from the understanding, the trust follows naturally. As you practice this state of rational trust, you will notice something remarkable. Your intuition becomes clearer. When fear dominates the mind, every internal signal is contaminated by anxiety, and it becomes nearly impossible to distinguish genuine guidance from fear-based projection. But when trust calms the mental waters, you can perceive much more clearly what actions to take, what opportunities to pursue, what connections to make. The thinking substance is always communicating with you, always guiding you toward your expansion, but these communications are drowned out by the static of fear. Rational trust quiets the static, and suddenly you can hear the guidance that was always there, waiting for you to become receptive enough to receive it. This receptivity extends to every area of your life. In your work, you become open to inspiration and innovative ideas that fear would have blocked. In your relationships, you become capable of genuine intimacy that fear would have prevented. In your health, you become accessible to the body's natural healing intelligence that fear would have overridden with stress chemicals. In your financial life, you become able to see and seize opportunities that fear would have made invisible or too risky to approach. Rational trust is not just one quality among many that contribute to success. It is the master quality that unlocks all the others by removing the barrier that kept them from expressing. With the foundation of rational trust established, we can now examine the specific techniques Wattles offers for dissolving fear in the moment of its arising. These are not positive thinking tricks or affirmations to be repeated without understanding. They are logical operations, reorientations of perception based on the truths we have established. When practiced consistently, They become reflexive responses to fear, automatic corrections that prevent anxiety from taking hold and poisoning your creative state. There are 3 primary antidotes, each addressing a different aspect of the fear illusion. The first antidote is what we might call the recognition of source. This technique addresses the most common form of fear: anxiety about provision, about having enough resources to survive and thrive. Whether you are worried about money, about job security, about having enough time, or about any other form of supply, this fear is rooted in a fundamental misperception about where your supply actually comes from. The fearful mind believes that supply comes from external sources, from employers, clients, investments, inheritance, or lucky circumstances. Because these sources are visibly limited and potentially unreliable, fear seems reasonable. How can you not worry when your provision depends on forces beyond your control? But Wattles reveals that this perception is a category error of the most profound kind. Your supply does not come from any external circumstance. It comes from the infinite formless substance, the thinking substance that constitutes all of reality and can take any form needed for your provision. Your employer is not your source. They are merely a channel through which the source chose to flow this particular month. Your investments are not your security. They are temporary forms that the infinite took to support you in a particular season. If one channel closes, the source can open another. If every visible channel closed simultaneously, the source could create entirely new channels that did not exist before. The supply is never at risk because the source is infinite. Only the channels change. When fear about provision arises, therefore, the first antidote is to consciously remind yourself of this truth. My supply does not come from this economy, this job, this client, or this investment. My supply comes from the infinite formless substance, which is inexhaustible and infinitely creative. What I see as my provision is merely the current channel. The source behind all channels cannot fail me. This is not denial of practical realities. You still navigate the world of form, still work with the channels that are currently open, but you do so without the fear that comes from mistaking the channel for the source. You hold your channels lightly, grateful for them while knowing that they are not your security. The source is your security. This reorientation accomplishes something remarkable. It shifts your reliance from the fragile to the unbreakable. As long as your sense of security is based on external circumstances, you will be anxious because external circumstances are inherently unstable. Jobs can be lost, investments can crash, economies can collapse, and even healthy bodies can suddenly fail. If your peace depends on the stability of these forms, you will never know peace because no form is ultimately stable. But when your sense of security is based on your connection to the infinite source, which cannot be exhausted, cannot fail, cannot ever run out of creative options, you have access to a peace that circumstances cannot touch. The external situation may change, may present challenges, may require adaptation, but your fundamental security remains unshaken because it is rooted in the unchangeable. The second antidote is the rejection of competition, and it addresses the fear of not having enough that comes from believing you exist in a zero-sum world. On what Wattles calls the competitive plane, there is a fixed amount of good, and for you to have more, someone else must have less. Success means beating others to limited resources. This belief generates constant fear because you are surrounded by competitors, all of them trying to take what you need, all of them potential threats to your survival and success. How can you not be afraid when you are in a war of all against all for scarce resources? Wattles' teaching demolishes this entire framework by revealing that you are not meant to operate on the competitive plane at all. You are meant to operate on the creative plane, where there is no competition because there is no scarcity. On the creative plane, you do not take from others. You add to the world. You do not compete for existing resources. You create new value that did not exist before. And because you are creating from the formless substance, which is infinite, there is no limit to what can be created. You are not fighting other creators for a piece of a fixed pie. You are each baking new pies from an unlimited supply of ingredients. There is no more reason to fear other successful people than there is to fear that they might use up all the numbers. The practical application of this antidote comes when you notice fear arising from a competitive framework. Perhaps you fear that a competitor will take your market share, that someone else will get the job you wanted, or that there is not enough wealth in the world for you to become rich without impoverishing others. In these moments, you consciously reject the competitive premise. I am not a competitor fighting for scraps. I am a creator, and if what I need does not currently exist, I will create it out of the formless substance. There is no lack of material to create from. There is no limit to what can be brought into being. I do not need to take from anyone, because I can create for myself and add to the total of existing good. This rejection of competition fundamentally changes your relationship with other people. On the competitive plane, every other person is a potential threat, and your relationships are contaminated by the fear of being outdone, outmaneuvered, or outperformed. On the creative plane, other people become potential collaborators, sources of inspiration, or simply fellow creators whom you can appreciate without envy. Their success does not threaten yours, because success is not a limited commodity. You can genuinely celebrate when others thrive because their thriving does not diminish your possibilities in the slightest. This is not forced generosity. It is the natural consequence of understanding that you live in an unlimited universe. The third antidote is perhaps the most powerful and the most immediately applicable: the act of gratitude. Gratitude is the vibrational frequency that is directly opposite to fear, and the two cannot coexist in the same consciousness at the same moment. When you are genuinely grateful, fear cannot touch you. When you are afraid, gratitude is absent. This is not merely a psychological observation, but a principle of mental mechanics. The state of appreciation and the state of anxiety are mutually exclusive, like light and darkness, like inhaling and exhaling. You can switch rapidly between them, but you cannot experience both simultaneously. This gives you an immediate practical tool for dissolving fear in any moment. The moment you notice fear arising, the tightness in your chest, the racing thoughts, the scenarios of disaster playing in your imagination, you can switch immediately to gratitude. Not gratitude for random, pleasant things in an attempt to distract yourself, but specific, targeted gratitude for what is coming, for what your faith tells you is on its way, even if it has not yet manifested. I am grateful that the money I need is flowing to me now. I am grateful that the right opportunity is being prepared for me. I am grateful that the universe is arranging circumstances for my success, even as I speak. This is the fear kill switch that turns off anxiety instantly by replacing it with its opposite frequency. The genius of this technique is that it does not require you to resolve the situation before finding peace. Traditional approaches to fear often suggest that you will feel better once the feared situation is resolved, once you have enough money, once you land the job, once the health scare passes. But this makes your peace contingent on external circumstances, which keeps you trapped on the treadmill of anxiety. Gratitude for what is coming allows you to feel the peace of resolution now, before the form has manifested, based on your trust that the thinking substance is working on your behalf. The gratitude is not for nothing. It is for the reality that your understanding tells you is already in motion, even if your physical eyes cannot yet see it. These three antidotes, recognition of source, rejection of competition, and the act of gratitude, are not separate techniques to be used at different times, but three aspects of a single reorientation of consciousness. They support and reinforce each other. When you recognize that your supply comes from the infinite source, it becomes easier to reject competition because there is no need to compete for what is unlimited. When you reject competition and see yourself as a creator, gratitude flows naturally because you appreciate the creative power you have been given. When you practice gratitude, you strengthen your connection to Source and deepen your recognition that competition is unnecessary. Together, they form a complete protocol for living without fear. The application of these antidotes must become habitual, which requires practice in the beginning. Wattles would say that you must use your will to hold your thoughts on these truths until they become the natural movement of your mind. Every time fear arises, you have an opportunity to strengthen the new pattern, recognize the source of your supply, reject the competitive framework, switch to gratitude. In the beginning, this will feel effortful, like learning any new skill. But with consistent practice, it becomes increasingly automatic, until one day you realize that fear has lost its grip on you, not because you suppressed it, but because you simply stopped feeding it with the false beliefs on which it depended. The 3 antidotes we have explored provide the tools for dissolving fear when it arises, but Wattles goes further in his teaching, addressing not just the cure, but the prevention. He advocates what we might call a policy of zero tolerance for worry, an uncompromising commitment to stopping fearful thoughts at their very inception before they can build momentum and take over your consciousness. This is not merely a preference but a necessity, for the nature of fear is to grow, to feed on attention, to elaborate itself into increasingly vivid scenarios of disaster. A worry thought left unchecked does not politely wait at a small size. It expands to fill all available mental space. Wattles uses an analogy that captures the urgency of this approach. Treat a worry thought like a spark in a dynamite factory. You do not observe it with interest, analyze its origins, or wonder whether it might be significant. You stomp it out instantly, without hesitation, without debate. The consequences of letting it continue are too catastrophic to risk even a moment of indulgence. This might seem extreme to someone who has normalized a constant background level of anxiety, but Wattles understood that worry is not an innocent mental activity. It is a direct and deliberate use of your creative power to build mental images of what you do not want. Every moment spent worrying is a moment spent creating disaster in imagination, and imagination is the workshop of the thinking substance. The logic here is inescapable once you understand how the universe responds to your dominant mental states. The thinking substance does not distinguish between imagination and desire. It responds to whatever you hold persistently in mind with faith and emotional intensity. When you worry, you are not merely having uncomfortable thoughts. You are placing orders with the cosmic warehouse for deliveries you do not want. You are using your creative power, which is meant to bring you abundance and joy, to instead prepare the conditions for poverty and suffering. This is why Wattles does not treat worry as a minor bad habit to be gradually reduced. He treats it as a fundamental misuse of your divine creative power that must be stopped immediately and completely. The practical application of zero tolerance means developing an acute sensitivity to the very first movements of worry in your consciousness. Most people do not notice they are worrying until the worry has already elaborated into a full scenario, complete with vivid imagery and strong emotional charge. By this point, the pattern has significant momentum, and interrupting it requires considerable effort. But with practice, you can learn to catch worry at its inception, that first subtle contraction, that initial whisper of "what if?" and apply the antidotes before it has a chance to grow. The earlier you catch it, the easier it is to redirect. This zero-tolerance policy extends not just to obvious worry, but to more subtle forms of fearful thinking. Pessimism, cynicism, skepticism about good outcomes, habitually imagining what could go wrong. All of these are seeds of fear that, if allowed to germinate, will produce the bitter fruit of disconnection from source. Wattles would have you examine your thought life with the vigilance of a gardener who cannot afford to let weeds establish themselves. Any thought that contradicts the truth of your security in an abundant universe, any thought that assumes scarcity, hostility, or limitation, must be immediately pulled out and replaced with its opposite. This is not positive thinking in the superficial sense. It is thought hygiene based on your understanding of how reality works. The result of maintaining this zero-tolerance policy is not tension or mental exhaustion, but increasing freedom and lightness. In the beginning, you may need to catch and redirect many fearful thoughts throughout the day, which can feel like work. But each time you successfully redirect, you weaken the habit of worry and strengthen the habit of trust. Over time, fearful thoughts arise less frequently because they have nowhere to take root. Your mental soil has become inhospitable to weeds because it is so thoroughly filled with the plants you want. Eventually, you find that peace has become your default state, that you can go hours or days without a significant worry, that even challenges and uncertainties can be met with equanimity because your foundation of trust has become unshakable. Having established the positive framework for living without fear, the understanding of a friendly universe, the cultivation of rational trust, the 3 antidotes, and the zero-tolerance policy, we must now turn our attention to the mistakes that will undermine this practice if not recognized and avoided. These are not exotic errors that only the unwise make. They are common, pervasive habits that seem innocent, but are actually devastating to your mental clarity and creative power. If you practice everything we have discussed while continuing these mistakes, your results will be sabotaged, and you may wrongly conclude that Wattles' teachings do not work. The teachings work perfectly. It is these mistakes that prevent you from experiencing the results. The first mistake, and this is the revelation promised earlier in this teaching, is the habit of consuming negative impressions. You have been waiting to understand what Wattles identified as the primary source of fear, the fear feeder that keeps anxiety alive in millions of minds despite their conscious desire for peace. Here it is, stated plainly, the consumption of media that fills your mind with images of disaster, lack, crime, political conflict, economic doom, and human suffering. Wattles wrote over a century ago, yet his words could not be more relevant to today. Do not read books which tell you that the world is soon coming to an end. Do not read the accounts of sensational crime. This instruction is not about being uninformed or naive. It is about understanding what happens to your mind when you voluntarily expose it to a constant stream of negative impressions. Every news report about economic disaster implants an image of scarcity in your mind. Every story about violence strengthens the impression of a hostile world. Every political argument reinforces the feeling that conflict and division are normal, that there is not enough for everyone, that you must fear your neighbors and defend against threats. You may think you are being a responsible citizen by staying informed, but what you are actually doing is systematically programming your mind with the very beliefs that generate fear and disconnect you from the thinking substance. Consider the mechanics of what is happening. Your mind learns through repetition of images and ideas. When you watch the news daily, you are subjecting yourself to a carefully curated selection of the worst events happening anywhere in the world. Because negative events generate engagement and advertising revenue, you are not seeing a representative picture of reality. You are seeing a concentrated extract of everything frightening and threatening that journalists could find. Your brain, which evolved to learn quickly from dangerous situations, absorbs these impressions and updates its model of reality accordingly. After years of this conditioning, is it any wonder that you feel anxious, that the world seems threatening, that fear seems like a reasonable response to life? Wattles would say that by consuming this media, you are voluntarily infecting yourself with the fear virus. No one is forcing you to watch, read, or listen. You are choosing to sit before the screen that delivers poison to your mind, day after day, and then wondering why you cannot think positively, why you cannot trust the universe, why fear seems so persistent despite your efforts. The solution is radical and non-negotiable. You must guard your eyes and ears with extreme vigilance. You must recognize that every piece of fear-inducing media you consume is a direct attack on your connection to the source of your good, and you must refuse to participate in your own mental destruction. This does not mean ignorance of practical matters that affect your life. It means being extremely selective about what information you allow into your consciousness and from what sources. If you need to know something relevant to your decisions, you can seek that specific information intentionally, process it, and move on. What you must eliminate is the passive consumption of whatever the media machine decides to feed you, the habitual checking of news, the idle scrolling through feeds full of outrage and disaster. These activities serve no purpose except to keep you in a state of fear and disconnection, and they must be treated as the dangerous self-sabotage that they truly are. The second mistake is equally insidious, and perhaps even more common: the habit of pre-playing disasters in your imagination. This is the mental rehearsal of worst-case scenarios, the what-if game played to its most terrible conclusions. What if I lose my job? Let me imagine the sequence. First, I will run out of money. Then I will lose my home. My family will suffer. My health will deteriorate from stress. I will end up alone and destitute. The mind, untrained, has an almost magnetic attraction to these scenarios, as if rehearsing them could somehow protect you or prepare you for the catastrophe. But Wattles identifies this as a fundamental misuse of your most precious faculty, the imagination. Your imagination is not a toy for idle entertainment. It is the workshop in which your future is constructed. Whatever you hold persistently in imagination, charged with emotion and belief, becomes the blueprint that the thinking substance uses to create your experience. When you use your imagination to rehearse disaster, you are essentially commissioning the construction of the very outcomes you fear most. You are hiring the most powerful creative force in the universe, your own mind in partnership with the formless substance, to build you a life of poverty, failure, and suffering. Why would you ever do this? The answer, of course, is that you do not realize what you are doing. The habit feels natural because it is so common. Everyone around you engages in worry, and it seems like a normal part of being human. But Wattles wants you to see it for what it is, a catastrophic misuse of creative power. Your imagination can build any future you choose: health, wealth, love, creative fulfillment, contribution to the world. Why use this miracle capacity to build monsters? Why create elaborate visions of disaster when you could be creating elaborate visions of triumph? The question answers itself once asked clearly, and the appropriate response becomes obvious. Refuse to participate in catastrophic imagination. When the mind begins to construct a worst-case scenario, interrupt immediately and redirect to a best-case scenario, or simply refuse to imagine future events at all and keep your attention on present constructive action. Against these mistakes, Wattles offers positive prescriptions, tips from the master that summarize the art of living without fear. These are not merely suggestions, but commands from someone who understood the stakes involved. He writes with the urgency of someone who knows that every moment spent in fear is a moment of creative power wasted, a moment of your divine inheritance squandered on building prisons instead of palaces. His central command regarding speech and thought could not be more direct. Cast out speech of poverty. Do not speak of your financial limitations as if they were permanent fixtures of your identity. Do not discuss your problems as if they were interesting facts to be analyzed and shared. Do not admit scarcity or lack as even a possibility in your life. When you speak of poverty, you strengthen its reality in your mind and in the minds of those who hear you. When you discuss problems, you give them energy and substance they would not otherwise have. Wattles would have you become silent about everything you do not want to strengthen, and vocal only about the abundance, possibility, and success that you choose to create. This extends to your thoughts as well as your speech. The thought of poverty held in mind is hardly less damaging than the word of poverty spoken aloud. You must train yourself to refuse mental residence to any idea that contradicts your chosen direction of expansion. When a thought of lack arises, do not entertain it. Do not analyze it. Do not give it the attention it seeks. Simply notice it, recognize it as contrary to truth, and redirect your attention to thoughts of abundance and possibility. This is not denial of reality. It is the deliberate creation of the reality you prefer from the infinite possibilities available to you. There is a beautiful and paradoxical instruction from Wattles that often surprises people when they first encounter it. The very best thing you can do for the whole world is to make the most of yourself. This seems almost selfish, as if personal development and world service were in conflict. But Wattles understood something profound. You cannot give what you do not have. A poor person cannot effectively relieve poverty. They can only demonstrate it. A fearful person cannot effectively teach peace. They can only spread their anxiety. A limited person cannot effectively expand others. They can only model limitation. But someone who has truly made the most of themselves, who has accessed their creative power, connected with the source of all abundance, and demonstrated what is possible for a human being in partnership with the thinking substance, such a person becomes a living invitation for others to do the same. Your commitment to eliminating fear, therefore, is not a selfish pursuit. It is your highest service to the world. Every time you choose trust over worry, you strike a blow against the collective hypnosis of fear that enslaves humanity. Every time you demonstrate success born of creative thinking, You prove what is possible for others who are still trapped in competitive, fearful mindsets. Every time you speak words of abundance instead of scarcity, you plant seeds in the minds of your listeners that may one day flower into their own liberation. The most generous thing you can do for those you love is to free yourself from fear so completely that your very presence becomes permission for others to free themselves. This brings us full circle to the fundamental principle with which we began. Fear is not a minor problem to be managed alongside other considerations. It is the violation of the fundamental principle, the error that disconnects you from everything you want and everything you were born to create. Eliminating fear is not one goal among many. It is the prerequisite goal, the first domino that must fall before all others can follow. Whatever success you have achieved while still carrying fear is only a fraction of what becomes possible when fear is dissolved. Whatever joy you have experienced while still worrying about the future is only a preview of the sustained bliss available to a mind at peace with an abundant universe. The teaching we have received from Wattles might seem purely philosophical to some, beautiful in theory but disconnected from the hard realities of biology and neuroscience. It is therefore deeply significant that modern scientific research has confirmed the mechanisms that Wattles intuited over a century ago. The convergence of ancient wisdom and contemporary neuroscience provides a validation that strengthens both, showing that Wattles was not merely speculating, but accurately perceiving principles that govern the actual functioning of the human brain and its relationship with reality. Consider what happens in your brain when you experience fear. The amygdala, the almond-shaped structure deep in the brain that processes threat signals, activates and triggers what is commonly known as the fight or flight response. Stress hormones flood your system. Blood flow is redirected away from certain areas and toward others. Your body prepares for immediate physical action against a threat. This response evolved millions of years ago, when threats were typically physical and immediate. Predators, hostile tribe members, environmental dangers that required instant reaction. In that context, the fear response was brilliantly adaptive, providing the physiological resources needed to fight or flee. But here is what is crucial to understand. This ancient response system does not distinguish between a physical threat and an imagined one. When you worry about your financial future, your amygdala responds as if a tiger were approaching. When you imagine failure and embarrassment, your nervous system reacts as if you were actually experiencing those outcomes. And when you chronically consume media designed to trigger fear responses, you are essentially training your amygdala to be in a constant state of activation, as if you lived surrounded by predators. The biological system is working correctly. It is simply responding to the inputs you are giving it, which bear no relation to your actual circumstances. The consequences of chronic fear activation are profound and directly relevant to Wattles' teaching. When the amygdala triggers the stress response, one of its effects is to suppress activity in the prefrontal cortex, the most recently evolved part of the brain, the seat of our highest functions. The prefrontal cortex is where creativity happens, where long-term planning occurs, where complex reasoning takes place, where impulses are regulated in favor of wise decisions. When you are in a state of fear, this entire region is essentially taken offline. The brain's operating assumption is that if you are facing a tiger, you do not need to compose poetry or plan your 5-year goals. You need to act now, instinctively, without the delay of complex thought. This means that fear literally makes you dumber and less capable. It is not a metaphor, but a biological fact that fear reduces your access to your highest intelligence. The creativity you need to solve your problems, diminished by fear. The strategic thinking that would reveal opportunities, suppressed by fear. The emotional regulation that would keep you from self-sabotaging decisions, offline due to fear. The very capacities you most need to create the life you want are the capacities most damaged by the fear you carry about not having that life. The irony is painful once you see it clearly. Fear about failure directly creates the conditions that make failure more likely. Wattles' instruction to eliminate fear is therefore not merely spiritual advice, but biological necessity. If you want to access your highest intelligence, what might be called your genius-level capacity for creative thought and strategic action, You must reduce the chronic activation of your fear response. You must train your amygdala that you are not, in fact, surrounded by threats. You must stop feeding it the constant stream of fear-inducing inputs that keep it in a state of perpetual activation. The mental practices Wattles prescribes, cultivating trust, focusing on abundance, avoiding negative impressions, are exactly what is needed to calm the ancient fear circuits and allow the prefrontal cortex to function at its full capacity. Modern neuroscience has also confirmed what Wattles understood about the power of mental imagery. Brain imaging studies have shown that imagining an activity activates many of the same neural pathways as actually performing that activity. When athletes visualize perfect performance, their brains practice the neural patterns of that performance. When you vividly imagine a fearful scenario, your brain experiences and reinforces the patterns of that fear as if it were happening. This is why Wattles was so insistent about controlling imagination. You are literally programming your brain with every mental image you entertain, building neural architecture that will shape your perceptions, emotions, and actions. The neuroplasticity of the brain, its ability to physically restructure itself in response to experience, means that your chronic mental habits are literally sculpting the organ with which you think and feel. Years of worry carve deep grooves of anxiety into your neural architecture. Decades of focusing on threat and scarcity shape a brain that perceives threat and scarcity even where they do not exist. But this plasticity cuts both ways. Consistent practice of trust, gratitude, and abundant thinking can reshape the brain in the opposite direction, creating an organ optimized for creativity, opportunity recognition, and emotional well-being. Wattles' prescriptions are, from a neuroscientific perspective, a program for beneficial brain restructuring. This scientific validation should strengthen your resolve to implement what you have learned. You are not merely adopting a pleasant philosophy. You are engaging in a program of neural rehabilitation. You are not just thinking positive thoughts. You are rewiring a brain that has been conditioned by fear into a brain capable of its highest functioning. Every time you interrupt a worry and redirect to trust, you are weakening the fear pathways and strengthening the trust pathways. Every time you refuse to consume negative media, you are protecting your brain from inputs that would reinforce anxiety circuits. Every time you practice gratitude, you are training your brain in the neural patterns of abundance and possibility. The convergence of Wattles' century-old wisdom with contemporary neuroscience is more than an interesting coincidence. It suggests that the masters of the mind, working through introspection and careful observation of mental laws, discovered principles that scientific tools would later verify through external measurement. They did not have brain scanners, but they had penetrating insight into the workings of their own minds, and what they found there was consistent with what we now find using the most advanced technologies. This should give you confidence that you are not following arbitrary advice or ungrounded speculation. You are following principles that have been validated from within by the masters and from without by science. Let us ground this understanding in a concrete story that illustrates what becomes possible when someone actually applies Wattles' principles in the face of circumstances that would generate fear in anyone operating from the conventional mindset. This is not a parable, but a pattern that has been repeated countless times by those who have understood and applied the laws of the creative plane, even when, especially when, everyone around them was consumed by fear. Imagine a business owner who encounters a major economic recession. The news is relentlessly negative, filled with reports of business failures, job losses, and economic contraction. Competitors in the same industry are panicking, cutting costs dramatically, laying off employees and contracting their operations to weather the storm. The dominant narrative is clear. This is a time of survival, not expansion. Anyone who does not recognize the threat and act accordingly is foolish and will be destroyed by the economic reality that is obvious to all informed observers. This business owner, however, has studied the teachings of Wallace Wattles. They understand that the economy, like all external circumstances, is a channel, not the source. They understand that the thinking substance is infinite and does not participate in recessions. They understand that fear places one on the competitive plane, where scarcity becomes real for those who agree to it, while trust places one on the creative plane, where abundance remains available to those who maintain their connection to Source. Armed with this understanding, they make a choice that seems irrational to their fearful peers. They refuse to participate in the panic. Instead of contracting, this owner looks for opportunities to expand. While others are cutting marketing, they increase it knowing that their message will now stand out against reduced competition. While others are laying off talented employees, they hire the best people suddenly available in the market. While others are paralyzed by fear and unable to make decisions, they move quickly and decisively, guided by the clarity that comes from a mind not clouded by anxiety. They do not deny that a recession is occurring. They simply refuse to let that recession determine their creative possibilities. They remain on the creative plane, while their competitors collectively agree to experience scarcity. The results unfold exactly as Wattles would predict. The fearful businesses operating from contraction create contracting results. Their cuts reduce their capacity to serve customers. Their panicked energy repels rather than attracts. Their expectations of difficulty become self-fulfilling prophecies. Meanwhile, the trust-based business, operating from expansion, creates expanding results. Their investments in marketing bring customers who have fewer alternatives due to competitors' contractions. Their hiring of excellent people improves their ability to serve and innovate. Their calm confidence attracts opportunities that fear-based competitors cannot perceive. By the time the recession ends, the business landscape has been transformed. Many fear-based competitors have failed or permanently diminished. The trust-based business has captured significant market share, recruited excellent talent, and established a stronger market position than would have been possible in more competitive times. The recession, which destroyed those who agreed to its reality, became an accelerant for someone who understood that scarcity is only real for those who choose the competitive plane. The disaster was selective, absolutely real for those who believed in it, essentially irrelevant for one who maintained connection to the infinite source. This story is not exceptional. It is the consistent pattern. In every economic downturn, some businesses and individuals thrive while others struggle. The difference is rarely about starting resources, market position, or even intelligence in the conventional sense. The difference is about the mental plane from which one operates. Fear creates contraction, which creates the conditions for further fear, in a downward spiral that ends in failure. Trust creates expansion, which creates evidence for further trust, in an upward spiral that ends in success that fear-based observers cannot understand or replicate. The principles work with mathematical precision for anyone who actually applies them. We have traveled far together in this teaching, from the identification of fear as the fundamental error that disconnects you from your creative power, through the understanding of a friendly universe that makes fear logically unnecessary, through the specific techniques for dissolving fear when it arises, past the common mistakes that sabotage practitioners, and into the scientific validation that confirms what the masters knew through direct insight. Now we must synthesize this knowledge into its crystalline essence, the core understanding you will carry forward from this video into your transformed life. Fear is not a protector. This is perhaps the most important inversion of conventional wisdom you must accomplish. Every cultural message you have received has portrayed fear as your friend, the voice that keeps you safe, the guardian that warns you of danger. And for your primitive ancestors facing physical threats, this was true. But you are not facing tigers. The fears that dominate modern minds, fear of financial ruin, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of the future, are not protective responses to real dangers. They are parasites that feed on your creative energy and give you nothing in return but nightmares, stress, and diminished capacity. Consider what fear actually costs you. It costs you health, as chronic stress hormones degrade your body over time. It costs you intelligence, as the fear response suppresses your highest cognitive functions. It costs you creativity, as the expansive thinking required for innovation cannot occur in a contracted state. It costs you relationships, as fear makes you defensive, suspicious, and unable to receive love fully. It costs you opportunity, as fear-based perception cannot see the possibilities that trust-based perception reveals. It costs you joy, as the fearful mind cannot experience the present moment, but is always projecting into an imagined threatening future. And it costs you success, as the creative power that would build your dreams is instead diverted to building mental images of disaster. Against this massive cost, what does fear give you? Nothing. It does not protect you from the disasters it imagines, because most of those disasters never occur. And for the challenges that do occur, fear leaves you less capable of handling them, not more. The worried mind is not better prepared than the trusting mind. It is worse prepared because it has exhausted itself with unnecessary suffering before the challenge even arrives, and has suppressed the very faculties it would need to meet the challenge effectively. Fear is pure cost, pure loss, a parasite that takes everything and contributes nothing. You have the power to starve this parasite. That is the message of Wattles and the message of this teaching. You are not helpless before your fear. You are the consciousness in which fear arises, and you have the authority to refuse it residence. Every technique we have discussed, recognizing your true source, rejecting the competitive framework, switching to gratitude, guarding your mental inputs, refusing to entertain catastrophic imagination, these are all methods of starving the fear parasite by denying it the food it needs: your belief, your attention, your creative energy. When you consistently deny fear these nutrients, it weakens and eventually dies, and you discover beneath it a natural state of trust that was always there, waiting to be uncovered. I want to speak to you now not as a teacher conveying information, but as one consciousness recognizing another, as someone who sees the divine creative power within you, even if you have temporarily forgotten it yourself. The transformation we have discussed is not merely possible for you, it is your birthright. You were not created to live in fear. You were not designed for anxiety. The universe that made you is an expression of infinite intelligence, and that intelligence does not create beings meant to suffer from imaginary threats. Your natural state is trust, creativity, and joyful expansion. Fear is the aberration, the deviation, the illness. Health is what awaits when the illness is cured. The universe is safe. I know this contradicts everything your conditioning has told you, everything the news reports daily, everything your worry-filled mind has rehearsed for years. But I am telling you the truth that the masters have always known. The universe is safe for those who understand it. Not safe in the sense that nothing challenging ever happens. Challenges are part of the creative adventure, but safe in the sense that you are held, supported, and provided for by an intelligence that wants your flourishing with a desire even greater than your own. You are not alone. You have never been alone. The apparent loneliness was always an illusion created by the fog of fear. And when that fog lifts, you see that you are surrounded by support, by opportunity, by creative power waiting to flow through you. The supply is infinite. There is no scarcity except in the frightened imagination. The thinking substance from which all forms emerge cannot be exhausted. The creative power that made galaxies is the same creative power that operates through you when you think, imagine, and act from trust. Whatever you need can be created. Whatever does not yet exist can be brought into being. You are not competing for scraps from a limited pile. You are a creator with access to unlimited raw material. The fear of not having enough is a nightmare you have been dreaming, and I am here to wake you up. There is enough. There is more than enough. There is infinity, and you have access to it. The power within you is greater than any obstacle in front of you. Read that again. The power within you, the creative intelligence of the universe expressing through your unique form, is greater than any obstacle in front of you. The problems that seem so overwhelming are temporary forms in a universe where all forms are temporary. The challenges that seem insurmountable are opportunities for the infinite creative power to demonstrate what it can do through a willing channel. You have faced nothing that the power within you cannot handle. You will face nothing that the power within you cannot handle. The question is never whether sufficient power exists. The question is only whether you will stay connected to it by maintaining trust or disconnect from it through fear. You have nothing to fear but your own forgetfulness of who you are. This is the final truth I want to plant in your consciousness. Fear is forgetting that you are a child of the infinite, forgetting that you live in an abundant universe, forgetting that you are a creator rather than a victim. When you remember, fear becomes impossible. When you forget, fear seems inevitable. The practices we have discussed are practices of remembering, ways of keeping alive in your consciousness the truth of your nature and your situation. And as you practice remembering, you will find that you forget less often and remember more quickly, until eventually remembrance becomes your constant state and forgetfulness becomes a rare and temporary interruption. Wake up. This is my call to you across whatever distance separates us. Wake up from the nightmare of fear. Wake up from the hallucination of scarcity. Wake up from the trance of competition and threat that has kept you small and suffering. Wake up to the magnificence of who you are and the abundance of the universe you inhabit. Remember your power, not as arrogance, but as accurate self-assessment, not as ego inflation, but as simple recognition of what has always been true. And walk through the world with the calm authority of a creator who knows beyond any possibility of doubt that the universe is conspiring in their favor. I conclude this teaching with a challenge and an invitation, not merely to understand what you have heard, but to embody it through action that will prove the truth in your own experience. Understanding without application is like reading about food without eating. It leaves you intellectually informed but still hungry. The masters did not teach for the purpose of creating more knowledgeable followers. They taught for the purpose of creating transformed lives. If this teaching has resonated with you, the next step is not to nod in agreement but to act. The challenge I offer you is simple but radical: a 7-day media detox. For the next 7 days, turn off the news completely. Do not watch, read, or listen to any news broadcast from any source. Unfollow social media accounts that post negative, divisive, or fear-inducing content. Refuse to engage in conversations about political problems, economic disasters, or societal decline. When someone tries to pull you into such a conversation, decline gracefully and redirect to something constructive. For 7 days, feed your mind only with ideas of growth, wealth, possibility, and creative power. This will be more difficult than you expect, which itself is diagnostic. If the thought of going 7 days without news creates anxiety, but I need to stay informed, what if something important happens? Notice that anxiety for what it is, evidence of how deeply the fear programming has penetrated your consciousness. The world will not end because you took a week off from monitoring it. Nothing that happens in the news will require your immediate action. The fear that you must constantly watch is itself a symptom of the disease we are treating. What you will discover in these 7 days may shock you. You will notice your anxiety levels dropping as you stop receiving the daily dose of fear your mind has been habituated to. You will notice your thoughts becoming calmer and more creative as the mental space previously occupied by worry becomes available for imagination and planning. You will notice your energy increasing as the drain of chronic stress response decreases. You will notice that you are able to think more clearly, feel more deeply, and create more powerfully than you have in years, perhaps ever. And you will realize how much of what you thought was just your personality or the unavoidable stress of modern life was actually a controllable condition caused by controllable inputs. This challenge is not the end, but the beginning. If 7 days reveals the benefits of guarding your mental inputs, why would you ever return to the old pattern? The detox is an opportunity to break the habit, to experience an alternative, and to make a conscious choice about how you will feed your mind going forward. Some who take this challenge decide to never go back to regular news consumption, realizing it served no genuine purpose in their lives and caused immense harm. Others choose to engage occasionally and selectively with information that genuinely affects their decisions, while avoiding the passive consumption that was destroying their peace. The choice is yours, but it must be a conscious choice, not a default return to unconscious habit. If you are ready to destroy the illusion of fear and reclaim your creative birthright, I invite you to take action beyond this challenge. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already, for we will continue to explore the teachings of the great masters who understood the laws of mind and reality. Share this video with someone you love, who you know struggles with fear and worry, for there is no greater gift than the gift of liberation. And commit, in the silent sanctuary of your own heart, to living as the fearless creator you were born to be. Not because you have suppressed or managed your fear, but because you have understood your way out of it, and understanding has made fear impossible. The universe awaits your awakening. The thinking substance stands ready to pour abundance through you the moment you open through trust. Your highest life, your fullest expression, your greatest contribution to the world, all of this has been waiting for you to step out of the fog of fear and into the clarity of creative power. That step is available to you now. That step is available to you always. The masters have shown the way, the path is clear. Walk it.